The Lord has been so good to me.
Amen.
Even when I was a lost sinner, God was faithful to my soul to convict me of being a sinner. It was terrible, and I thank Him so much for doing that for me.
Yes.
I was probably about 13 years old when the Lord, pardon the way I'm going to say this, started dealing with me, and I mean, I was getting under conviction of the Lord, and it lasted till maybe 10, 11 years, till I was 24 or 25 years old. I want to try to speak this morning on things I didn't know God was doing for me.
Amen.
Acts 17, 20, 26 and 27. Talking about God, and has made of one blood all nations of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. I believe God orchestrated our salvation. I believe the hand of God was always there, near us. He was the director of our salvation, though we didn't see him, though we didn't know him.
Yep.
I was born on the mill village, Pepperton Cotton Mill Village. I didn't know that God had caused me to be born there. I just figured I was born there because my mom and dad were married and they wanted to have a family. I didn't know God appointed the bounds of my habitation. I thought the reason I was there in Pep, that's what we called it, there in Pep, because that's where my mom and dad was. My dad had a job in the cotton mill, and the cotton mill provided us with a home because he worked there. I didn't know that God has caused me to be born in the year and the month and the day that I was born, because it was for the, excuse me, I've got over my nervousness, but I hadn't got over God.
Amen. Never will. Brother. Amen.
But God caused me to be born then. It was the best time in all the years that they'd been years for me to be born and to hear the gospel in my times.
Yes.
And I didn't know that that was the reason he set the bounds of my habitation. There's three things that I'll try to talk about today. Things I didn't know God was doing for me. We lived in the lower part of Pep. Up on the upper end of Pep, there was Pepton Baptist Church. That's where I first heard the gospel. I was about 13, I said, when I started getting under conviction of my being a sinner. And it lasted till it almost wore me out. I went to church. I didn't have to go to church, but occasionally I went to church. Nobody made me go to church. I could go to church or not go to church. But occasionally over those 10 years, maybe 11 years, God was dealing with my heart. I occasionally, not faithfully, but occasionally went to church. I remember one time in particular that I went to church, and like I said, I didn't know why I went to church, but I went to church, and James Burleson, the pastor, was preaching, and he was a godly man, a humble man, a man that loved people and loved people's souls, and the people of the community there loved him. It was one night, and Brother Burleson preached, and I knew it was a bad night for me. And he preached, and he got through, and I was ready to go home, to my home, not to heaven, not then. And they started singing, "Just as I am, without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me." And then that little preacher, he got up there. I guess he gave an invitation. He never told anybody to come to Jesus. He didn't tell nobody to come down to the altar, but he put his hand, one hand over here, over his bridge of his nose, and other than up in the air. And they were singing, "Just as I am." And he was praying, but he didn't say nothing, but I knew he was praying. And he was praying for somebody, and I knew who he was praying for. He was praying for me. And that made it that much worse. And they sang, "Just as I am," a lot of times. And he prayed like that a lot of times, but didn't say nothing. And boy, I was in terrible shape. I had to get out of there, and I knew it. Finally, I got to looking at the preacher. And in those days, we didn't have air conditioning in the church. They had the window open, you know. And I don't remember any fans being there, but I was sitting back there on my right on that second bench back there next to a window. And I'd look at that preacher, and I'd look at that window. And I'd look at the preacher, and I'd look at the window. Oh, that window was so tempting. I had to get out of there. I had to get away from God's people. I had to get away from the Word of God. I had to get away from "just as I am," without one plea. And it was killing me. But finally they sang the last stanza of that song. The preacher quit praying, and I left in a hurry. You know, I thought back over my life, and I thought, why in the world did I go to church? Why in the world did I put myself through that? I said, I don't know. I guess I just thought of it. It was just something that was in my mind, you know, and I said, I don't know why I would do that, because most of the time I went to church, I'd get under conviction of being a sinner. And it was killing me. But finally they sang the last stanza of that song. The preacher quit praying, and I left in a hurry. You know, I thought back over my life, and I thought, why in the world did I put myself through that? I said, I don't know. I guess I just thought of it. It was just something that was in my mind, you know, and I said, I don't know why I would do that, because most of the time I went to church, I'd get under conviction of being a sinner. But I found out what it was. Proverbs 21:11, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, and as the rivers of waters, he turneth it wheresoever he will. Listen, if the king's heart's in God's hand and he can turn his heart to do whatever he wants him to do, he can turn my little heart.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Even as he turns the rivers of waters. And I knew then it wasn't my idea. It wasn't my thought. It didn't begin with me. God put that in my heart to go. These are things I didn't know that God was doing for me. I didn't know he was orchestrating my salvation.
Yeah.
And that Sandra, I was smitten. Smitten is a good word. I was smitten. I'm fast forwarding to this. Oh, we got engaged. We got married. We moved down to a little apartment on Covington Street, 547 Covington Street, 3-room apartment. I was still going to church occasionally. She went regular. And was having a revival down at Pepton Baptist Church. And she said, "Kenny, come on, let's go to revival." I knew it wasn't a good time for me to go to revival. So I said, "No, I'm not going," because I could already feel it. And I couldn't put myself in that position. And she said, "Well, come on, go with me." And I noticed she had tears rimming up in her eyes, and I thought, "Oh, me." I said, "I don't want to cry. I don't want to feel bad." I said, "I'll tell you what I do. You go on to church, and when you get there, tell them men to come down, and I'll talk with them after church." And she seemed to be satisfied with that, and I was satisfied because I'd bought me a little time. But what I didn't realize, I relaxed for a little while, but time was clicking on. I knew if it was about 9 o'clock, they'd be coming about 9:30. And it was getting close to 9:30, and I was scared. I didn't know what I was going to do. What would you do? Then I had an idea. It was dark, and I said, "I'll just walk down the street, and when they leave, I'll come back." Sounded like a good idea to start with, and I thought, "Oh, I can't do that. That ain't right. I can't do that." So I had what I thought was a better idea. I'm a, I don't know, 23 or 24-year-old man. I said, "I know what I'll do. I'll hide under the bed." And I thought about that a little while, and I thought, what if they come up over there and looking for me, and they pull up that bedspread and see me laying up on there holding on to the springs? And I come out from under that side, I feel like a fool. So I knew that wouldn't work. I was grabbing at straws and I was drowning fast. I said, I know what I'll do. I'll get in the clothes closet, get behind the clothes, close the door to be dark in there. That'd be a good place. And I thought, what if they open that door and they see my feet down there? They know it's me. And I have to come out behind them clothes. And I'd still feel like a fool. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was in a pickle. And then I thought, maybe she won't tell them. Maybe they won't come.
Yeah.
I said, no, she's going to tell them. And there was time. Heard some little dainty footprints, foot paddles coming up on the porch. I knew that was Sandra. I was listening close and hoping that I wouldn't hear any sounds behind her, people coming up on the porch, but here they come. Clonk, 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 clonk. They opened the door, and Brother Gene says I was caught like a deer in the headlights, standing right there in the middle of the living room floor. Men came in and they talked with me. I don't know what they said. I don't know if I said anything back. But I got down on my knees that night. And I told it like this to start with. Got down on my knees that night. I wasn't, pride wasn't keeping me from calling out. I didn't care anymore if them men heard me. I didn't care who heard me. I wanted God to hear me. And I told it to somebody like this. I said, that was the night I put my pride in the back seat and I grabbed hold to the mercy seat. Right. But then, after I told her, I said, no, that ain't the way it was. I said, for 11 years, I couldn't put my pride behind me. I couldn't do that. It was always there. It was always keeping me from calling up on the name of the Lord. Yeah. Too proud to tell anybody I was under conviction. I couldn't put it behind me. Never could. Yeah. God put my pride behind me that night. Yeah. And I called upon the name of the Lord for mercy and not to forsake me. He's been faithful to me. Zechariah 4:6 said, not by might, and I say not by my might, not by power, not by my power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. I know the Lord's done more than that for me, and probably things that I ain't found out that he'd done, but I didn't know these things. I didn't know he called me to be born when I was born, where I was born. I didn't know that he put it in my heart to go to church. And I didn't know it was him that put my pride behind me.
Amen. Yeah.
3 things I didn't know that God was doing for me. And I praise his holy name. I feel for anybody that's under conviction. You know, I've heard people hearing the gospel for the first time, and almost immediately they were saved. But you know, God deals with each individual as individuals because that's what we are.
Right, exactly.
And we don't always have God convicting us the same way. But hallelujah, we're saved the same way. We got a common salvation. I mean, it's not common being common, but we have Christ in common. Neither is there salvation in any other, for there's none other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. Hallelujah.